Well, the 49ers have a new defensive coordinator, and we finally got to meet him. First interview with the media for Steve Wilks was on Friday, had the weekend to digest what the veteran coach had to say. And now it's time to talk about how this 49ers defense is going to evolve under Wilks in 2023 and potentially beyond, because this was already the number one defense in all of football last season. So you think, well, D'Amico Ryans has gone to Houston. What can Steve Wilks do to build on that? Are they going to take a step back because they have a new coordinator? I think that, when you look at the previous defensive coordinator transition for the 49ers from Robert Saleh to D'Amico Ryans, there was a legitimate concern of freshness. D'Amico Ryans was not experienced as a coordinator. And throughout the first half of 2021, it took him a while to learn on the job. With Steve Wilks, that should not be an issue because this is a veteran coach, DB-oriented background, but he's been a head coach before. He's been a defensive coordinator before. The 49ers wanted their man. They got their man, and they feel that they won't skip a beat. In fact, I think they're going to become more aggressive because Kyle Shanahan told Steve Wilks, hey, get out here before your family. That's what my dad, Mike Shanahan, did back in 1992 when the 49ers hired Mike to be the offensive coordinator. Use these next 3 months to study what we've done over the past 6 years because the 49ers, again, number one defense in football, successful system. Kyle Shanahan required Steve Wilks to buy into that system. So Steve is going to bring his expertise, but he's going to meld it with what the 49ers have already done. He's not going to try to reinvent the wheel. Really good stuff in the press conference. Let's listen to the first thought that Steve Wilks had about this respect for the 49ers system.
Take me long to really realize why this place is so successful. You see it from the outside, from afar. But once I got here and had the opportunity to meet ownership, to spend some time with John and Kyle, it all came to reality for me. So to be here is definitely a blessing for me. To be around this talented defense, the players that we have, and the things that we were able to do in free agency and also in the draft, I'm extremely excited and looking forward to the season. So
the 49ers have that defensive line anchored by Nick Bosa, obviously Fred Warner and Dre Greenlaw on the linebacker level, best linebacking unit in football. The D-line took a little bit of a step back last year. Bosa definitely didn't. They think they can surge again this season. And obviously the defensive backfield, which has a lot of new faces, but has been pulling its weight lately. The 49ers had quite a few interceptions last year and near that league lead in interceptions, or at the league lead. It was either number one or number two. I think it was number one at the end of the season for the 49ers in picks. So this is a team that's getting it done both on the back end and up front, with the linebackers obviously being the glue that holds it all together, and that's the best linebacking unit in the league. Steve Wilks recognizes that. Steve Wilks knows what he's inheriting. And Steve Wilks, because he has success in his own right as a coach, thinks that even this really good defense has some room for improvement. Listen into this. This is Steve Wilks talking about the crash course that I asked him about, that Kyle Shanahan required him to undergo as soon as he signed with the 49ers. And this is Steve Wilks talking about, in general, how the 49ers defense can take it to the next level.
I think you have to embrace the success that they've had here. I think it's a foundation that we all agree we wanted to keep. And I think there's an opportunity as we go through the process, which we already have, is to try to tweak things a little bit. I still think there's room for improvement. If you talk to the players, they would tell you the same. So when it's not broke, you don't really want to try to fix it. And once again, we've had a lot of success around here, and we just want to continue to build on that.
Kyle mentioned that one of the things he wanted you to do first was to look back at all 6 years, of this regime and the defense that they had instilled before. What was your biggest takeaway, or what have been your biggest takeaways looking at what the 49ers have done since 2017?
Well, I think, and my philosophy is the same. I've always had this. Everything we do starts up front. When you look at how dominant we've been over the years, is because of our defensive line. And we've done a great job building that through the draft. As I just alluded to, we did some great things in free agency this past year. So Kasarik does a tremendous job. He's one of the best in the business at what he does, and he's had a major impact on this defense. So That was really the biggest thing that stood out to me was just how great we were up front consistently over the years.
And that's what people always seem to say when it comes to their first impression of this 49ers defense ever since Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch took over, right? That defensive line. I still remember back to 2017, the 49ers weren't a good team then, but you could tell they had something growing along that defensive line. They had Armstead, they had Buckner. Neither of those two had come close to realizing their potential yet, but they soon did reach it. They obviously added Bosa in 2019. D Ford came along in 2019. He obviously didn't play a whole lot due to the back issue, but when they had all four of those guys in there, that became the gold rush, right? That became the most ferocious pass rush in the NFL. So moving forward, no D Ford anymore, but the 49ers have acquired other players in the years since. Obviously, DeForest Buckner is gone too. Armstead, Bosa still there. New 49ers defensive coordinator Steve Wilks talked about some of the additions to the defensive line since those early years and how those additions might be hinge points for the 49ers moving into 2023.
I think, again, you have to go back to personnel, and I think you've seen what we've been able to do for us drafting certain guys. Kinlaw has just been tremendous since I've been here. I mean, the day that I came in on my interview, he was here working out. He has not missed a day of all-season training. So I'm excited to see exactly where he's going to be. The same thing with Drake. Drake has been here all summer, working out, all spring rather, doing the things that he needs to do to improve, his game. He's gained a lot of weight. He's in there with Kasarik, and I'm just excited to see exactly what he's going to do and how he's going to progress in his second year. You know what we did in free agency with Javon, so one of the best three techniques interior lineman in the National Football League. So I'm excited, and as I can say, I can be up here all day long talking about the Defensive Player of the Year. So we have a great front. We got to continue to build on that. And the one thing that I'm emphasizing and talking about, we got to complement each other. So there's different layers to this defense, and the back end has to do a great job.
Complement each other. That means the back end feeding off the front end. And obviously, based on what Steve Wilks just said, he's expecting big things from Javon Hargrave. He's expecting big things from Nick Bosa. But the first two players that he mentioned are Javon Kinlaw and Drake Jackson. And that's two things. One, those two guys have been around the facility, which is exactly what the 49ers want because they're two players who they want to improve this year. Kinlaw can obviously fortify that defensive line with a lot of quality depth now that they have Hargrave. And Drake Jackson might be even more important because he could be a frontline player opposite Nick Bosa. So it's just the reality of the situation. Kinlaw and Jackson have been around the facility. Jackson's added muscle. You heard Steve Wilks say it. That's what he's needed. Jackson had 4 sacks over the course of the first half of last year. His rookie season fell off a cliff there toward the end. 49ers weren't comfortable playing him because he was a little light, a little weak. Ran out of gas. The most he had played before was 11 or 12 games in college. This was a 20-game marathon last year. So Jackson has needed to stay at the facility and add muscle. When Steve Wilks first got hired, that's exactly what he noticed. So that's one thing, right? He saw those two guys. The second thing is this is good experienced coaching. Those are two guys who probably need a little bit of a boost, a little bit of a confidence booster to head into this next year. Javon Kinlaw obviously has missed so much time with injuries. Drake Jackson got his first taste in the NFL, but you want to give him a little bit more swagger. Steve Wilks knows what players need. And to mention Kinlaw, to mention Drake Jackson, to me, that tells me that the 49ers see them as very, very important hinge points to their success for the reasons that I just outlined. And two, it tells me that Steve Wilks already knows his personnel, already knows the situations at hand. He took those 3 months of learning without his family here in the Bay Area very, very seriously. He said, hey, I'm going to delve into this program. I'm going to figure out what all my individual players need. I'm going to figure out what they do schematically, and I'm going to figure out how to meld my own schematic principles with what the 49ers are doing. So along those lines, man zone versatility. 49ers have obviously played a lot of zone in the past defensively. They were a cover 3 team coming into this Shanahan-Lynch era with Robert Saleh, the Pete Carroll disciple, coming out of Seattle in 2017. We saw one of the greatest, cover man corners to ever do it in Richard Sherman. He was brought on as a prototype, right? In 2018, the 49ers wanted that cover 3 corner to really set the standard for everybody else and how they play defense. Tall, rangy corner. You played a lot of zone. over time, especially under D'Amico Ryans after Robert Saleh left, the 49ers have evolved defensively. We've seen more man coverage. We've also seen the talent increase. And the thing about, man versus zone is if you have excellent talent on the back end, you're going to be more comfortable playing man-to-man defense. And the 49ers, as they've evolved from a rush over coverage unit to a unit that complements itself, right? The coverage is complementing the rush and vice versa. We've seen that they have embraced man coverage to a greater degree. And Steve Wilks at his previous coaching stops has been aggressive, has played his share of man, but he also likes zone because in zone, those defensive backs have their eyes on the quarterback and they can generate some turnovers. So it's obviously going to be a combination of both. And listening to Steve Wilks discuss that combination, I think is our biggest clue yet as to what this 49ers defense will look like in 2023.
With the talent you have at linebacker, what are you referring to?
I'm referring to exactly the question they just talked about in regards to probably blitzing a little bit more. I believe in zone eyes. I think that's how you make plays on the football, particularly from the underneath positions. So zone is still going to be a high element of what we do, but I feel like we have the skill set and the talent to be able to get in, a guy's face, press man, make the quarterback hold the ball, particularly with our front. Explore and experiment with everything. My background is diverse in zone as well as man, and I think it can change each week based off your opponent and who you're playing. Do I feel like we have the skill set to play more man? Yes. At times, do I want to be a little bit more aggressive with the talent and athleticism that we have at linebacker? Yes.
There you go. He mentions the linebackers specifically, and I said that at the top of the show. These are the best linebackers in football, with Fred Warner and Dre Greenlaw and their ability to cover both tight ends, running backs coming out of the backfield, even slot receivers in certain situations. I mean, didn't you see Fred Warner just blanket CeeDee Lamb last year against the Cowboys? You have options as a defensive coordinator. So give Steve Wilks the keys to this Ferrari. And the number one defense statistically across multiple metrics was the 49ers defense. Give Wilks those keys, and he'll find a way to mix the man, mix the zone, and find the best possible combination to put the best possible product on the field. Now, Wilks, interestingly, is going to do this up from the booth. The first two 49ers defensive coordinators of this regime, Robert Saleh and then D'Amico Ryans, both coach from the field. Steve Wilks prefers to get the bird's eye vantage point. A lot of people are saying, well, is he going to be emotional? Is he going to be able to, share that same excitement that D'Amico Ryans and Robert Saleh before him were able to really broadcast on the field? And of course, he's not going to be able to do that from the booth. But the 49ers have other assistant coaches who are plenty emotional. Chris Kasarik, the D-line coach, maybe the most emotional coach in the league, he's still going to be down on the sideline. And Johnny Holland, who's the linebackers coach, who can communicate, because linebackers in the middle of the defense, he can communicate with the D-line, he can communicate with the defensive backs. Johnny Holland is going to be Steve Wilks' man down on the field. So Wilks is going to be watching the secondary rotations. You can't really see those from the sideline. He's more DB oriented, so he's going to be watching how the safeties, how the cornerbacks can make adjustments, and then he's going to radio stuff in to either Daniel Bullocks, who's the 49ers DB coach who specializes in safeties. Wilks is working with the cornerbacks primarily, and he's going to radio it in to Johnny Holland. And Johnny Holland is the linebackers coach. He's going to be the actual man on the sideline who can be communicating Wilks' emotion and words or whatever he needs to 49ers players. Then obviously you have Fred Warner, who's a coach on the field. So there's nothing wrong with Steve Wilks, a coaching veteran, from being up top. That's where DB coaches like to be. That's where you could see the adjustments, and you got to make hundreds of them over the course of the game. He's going to be up with that bird's eye view, maybe some binoculars, but still just up in the booth near where I sit during these games, so you can actually see how everything is unfolding. But there is going to be aggressiveness via man coverage, as you heard Wilks talk about, and he specifically mentioned blitzes. The 49ers blitz rate used to be minuscule back when Robert Saleh was the coordinator. It increased with D'Amico Ryans. Who remembers that game against Cincinnati in 2021? 49ers win in overtime. They beat Joe Burrow. Some really, really well-timed blitzes that D'Amico Ryans dialed up. K'Wan Williams, the Shark, came in from that nickelback position. Those became, that I would say that was a bread and butter of the 49ers defense, that nickel blitz in 2021. They had the overpowering front of 19. It hasn't been nearly as strong since then. Down the stretch of 2021, the front, the front four started to really feel themselves. They started to really, I think, generate the ferocious four-man pressure, but it still was nowhere near what the Gold Rush did a few seasons back. So because of that, those blitzes are necessary. You trust the man coverage on the back end. You trust the zone coverage, whatever you're playing. You trust it. You bring an extra man. And I think Steve Wilks is ready to do that. The thing is that blitzes take skill. You need to have the personnel that can blitz. And for that reason, the 49ers did pick up a name or two that they truly do believe can get after the quarterback. And you know what? Steve Wilks was a big part of this personnel acquisition process himself.
Someone that I had the opportunity to go against being in that division. And, we didn't know exactly what was going to happen in free agency with Jimmy. And when that didn't happen, we wanted to make sure that we sort of got the best, nickel in free agency, and that's what we went out and did. So I'm excited about Oliver. He's long, he's physical, can tackle, can cover. He's going to be a good blitzer for us. Everything that we do within this defense.
That's Isaiah Oliver, who played in the NFC South. So Steve Wilks was previously with Carolina. Isaiah Oliver was with the Atlanta Falcons. So Wilks is familiar with Oliver's game. And you heard him say, I think we got the best nickel cornerback in the entire NFL free agency market in Isaiah Oliver. And the tape seems to agree. Oliver, especially near the end of his time with the Falcons, was really balling out. So the 49ers are going to plug him in for Jimmy Ward, who left to Houston. They're going to have the same two starting cornerbacks, presumably, as they ended last season with, in Charvarius Ward and Diamaro Lenore. And then they're going to be working a third safety. And the starting safeties should be the same, at least to begin the season, in Talanoa Hufanga and Tashawn Gibson. But obviously, Jair Brown, out of Penn State, he's going to be the third safety for the 49ers. And they absolutely love this guy. And he's impressive. And, Steve Wilks was sold on Jair Brown. So Wilks shows up with the 49ers, immerses himself in how they do things, similar to how Mike Shanahan immersed himself with the 49ers in 92. Kyle Shanahan has taped every single meeting since he took over as head coach in 2017. Bill Walsh actually started that. Bill Walsh was the coach who taped every single meeting. That allows new coaches to come in and just get caught up. And after getting caught up, Steve Wilks was able to say, okay, hey, I want to be able to communicate what type of talent, what type of players I want to execute this scheme. And that's how the 49ers have built this really good roster, is that the coaching staff works really well with the scouting department at draft time. And the coaching staff says, hey, we want these skill sets, go out and draft them. And Steve Wilks wanted X, X, and X as far as skill sets go. And that's why the 49ers traded up to get Jair Brown, the safety out of Penn State. He is a Steve Wilks guy. The only player in college football in this draft class who has double-digit interceptions over the past 2 seasons. That's Jair Brown. So 49ers are going to keep on trying to rack up those picks. They were at the top of the league last year. They're going to blitz a little bit more. A player like Isaiah Oliver, another great example of Steve Wilks finding somebody who fits the scheme, who, he wants that tool in his tool belt. Well, he went out and made sure the 49ers acquired Isaiah Oliver. That's what we talk about, cohesion between scouting department and coaching staff, even if it's a new coach like Steve Wilks. It's a really, really important way how the 49ers operate. Why don't we take a look at the defense that Steve Wilks is going to be working with right now? Here is the 49ers 90-man depth chart, along with a 53-man roster projection. If you want to take a look at this, I'm going to copy and paste it and toss it into the comment section or the chat section right now. And just as I did that, I see some comments. Well-timed aggression is key. Good stuff right here. They aren't changing the best defense in the league. Maybe you joined late, but I see this question. That's the whole point. They're not reinventing the wheel. They're making tweaks to make it even better. There's a difference. They are not changing the best defense in the league. Absolutely not. They have a new coordinator, an experienced coordinator, a respected mind, but they're just trying to take some of the weaknesses that they had last year and make them a bit better. They're trying to get a little bit better in the blitzing aspect. They're trying to leverage the fact that they've got the best linebackers in the league. Eric Gomes, strength in numbers, keep everyone fresh up front. That is also very, very important. All right, let's take a look at this. Let's see what Steve Wilks have to work with. You look at the depth chart, and hopefully some of you have already logged on. Looks like 3 of you are on there. And you see the defense right here. These are, what I just highlighted in blue, these are the players that I would project to make the 53-man roster if the cut down were today. Obviously, injuries can change the way that people look at this, but up front, Bosa, Armstead, Javon Hargrave. I mean, that's such a huge addition It's the biggest addition possibly in free agency defensively in the entire league is Javon Hargrave. He was the straw that stirred the drink when you watch Philadelphia's tape last year. Hassan Reddick doesn't have nearly as big of a year. Josh Sweat doesn't have nearly as big of a year if Javon Hargrave is not a monster on the inside. That should help everybody. Then, we heard about Drake Jackson, the hinge point. Kinlaw and Drake Jackson. Well, one of the hinge points is, in line to potentially start. Now, maybe Cleveland Farrell starts at the other edge spot to begin the year, or is in there against run packages because he's stronger than Drake Jackson. But you can't escape the fact that the 49ers are going to need production on the opposite edge of Nick Bosa. They want to keep Armstead in a tackle. They obviously, Hargrave is a 3 technique, and Drake Jackson is kind of that missing piece if the 49ers want to be 4 deep along that front 4, full of prolific pass rushers. I think there's a lot of pressure on him. Now, the other hinge point, more of a depth piece, but we talk about the need for strength in numbers. Well, Javon Kinlaw can now be that. He doesn't have to be a frontliner. He can be a depth piece for the 49ers, along with Givens, along with Farrell, along with Robert Beal, exciting new edge rusher out of Georgia. Maybe they could just have Beal pin his ears back, get after the quarterback with that 4.47 speed. The 49ers have restocked the defensive line to where, to me, it seems possible now that D-line can truly come in waves and not be leaking oil, not be sucking wind as it was at times last year. They weren't nearly as deep last year, or even the year before. Now, they have restocked this roster. They really have. Objectively, you can say that. When a guy like Kerry Hyder Jr. is way here on that 3rd string of depth. When, they signed Marlon Davidson last week. I'm not sure if Marlon Davidson makes the team, former 2nd-round draft pick who was underwhelming to begin his career in Atlanta, but, still a talented guy. And you never know what happens when you put somebody through the Chris Kasarik boot camp. Austin Bryant, free agent signing, talented player out of Clemson, played for Detroit, has seen some injury issues. I don't have him making the roster. Spencer Wagee out of North Dakota State. He's an undrafted rookie. Maybe he makes the practice squad. Obviously, Alex Barrett has been a practice squad player. You just look at this D-line, and there's depth across the board in that D-line room. Oops, I just erased Kerry Hyder with Nick Bosa and put Nick Bosa in the 3rd string. That was a mistake. And I fixed it very, very quickly. But anyway, you got 4, 8, 12, 14, 15 D linemen right now. Going to be some really interesting battles here for the back end of the roster. Then you can go to the linebacker position, all right? So let's shift back here. Let's go to the linebackers, see where the 49ers are at. They obviously have their 2 studs at the top, and Warner and Greenlaw, but then Oren Burks, good special teams player, veteran. He can fill into that 3rd linebacker role for the time being. You've got other really good players that they could stick in there. I should put Jalen Graham a little bit higher up. I don't know why I have him way down here, but for the time being, D. Winters. D. Winters was awesome. He put on his TCU tape. D. Winters was crazy explosive. We're talking 7.5 sacks, 14.5 tackles for loss, and he wasn't really blitzing most of the time. It looks like he was blitzing because he's always shooting through the gap and making a big play in the backfield. Turns out that he was an instinctual player. Sooner rather than later, if D. Winters can prove that he's got the strength to deliver at the NFL level, sooner rather than later, you can move D. Winters up here into Oren Burke's spot. Not yet, though. And, maybe Jalen Graham does it too. D. Winters runs a 4.4, which is insanely quick for a linebacker. Jalen Graham, the 7th-round pick, he runs a 4.6, which is Fred Warner's speed, and he played a similar position as Fred Warner at Purdue in college. So, it's probably a mistake for me to have Jalen Graham way over here, and it's a good thing I just noticed that right now. Jalen Graham's got a chance to make the football team. If they really like D. Winters and Jalen Graham, then you could have both of these guys make the roster as such, and Demetrius Flanagan-Foles may be the guy that doesn't make the roster. Flanagan-Foles comes back to be another special teams ace with the 49ers. He probably makes it. They probably practice squad somebody. We haven't even gotten to Mariano Sari-Marin, Curtis Robinson, Marcelino McCrary-Ball. That's another name that really impressed last year. But as you can see, the 49ers used this offseason to load up on the option power, on the depth at these key positions, even the ones that they're already strong at up front. They've got some exciting young names coming up the pipeline, though, in linebacker behind Dre Greenlaw and Fred Warner. And that 3rd linebacker, they're about 30% of snaps. You're going to need that guy. So maybe it's Oren Burks. That's the fail-safe. But D. Winters and Jalen Graham, those 2 guys do pop off the screen as players with potential to work in this 49ers system. Finally, defensive backfield, because this is where Steve Wilks is a specialist. Man zone versatility, what's he going to play? Well, you've got Ward, you got Lenore, you got Oliver. Steve Wilks, you heard him say it. He thinks Isaiah Oliver is the best nickelback acquisition of this offseason. He thought he was the best nickelback in free agency. Hufanga and Gibson, obviously a great pair last year. That's where Jair Brown comes in. They're going to run some 3 safety sets. They really can run some 3 safety sets, especially with a player that is as instinctive as Jair Brown. George Odom, special teams player. And then, Isaiah Oliver, he's under contract for what, a couple of years? I think 3 years he signed a deal. But Darrell Luter Jr. waiting in the wings, both as cornerback depth and as a potential future nickelback. My question is Ambry Thomas going to make this football team? Is Ambry Thomas going to return to what he was at the end of year 1 instead of year 2? Because it's going to be a tight roster, and I think Samuel Womack III is higher up than him on the pecking order as we speak. So the 49ers want cornerback depth. Well, they might have it with a guy like Luter and with a guy like Womack, but Ambry Thomas, I think, is going to be important to these teams' fortunes if they're truly going to have cornerback depth. So let's answer some of your questions here about Steve Wilks, and let's play the intro video one more time. Again, 49ers aren't changing anything under Steve. Well, they're changing some stuff, but they're not changing their philosophy under Steve Wilks. What they're doing is they're tweaking what was the number 1 defense to try to make it even more dominant.
Take me long to really realize why this place is so successful. You see it from the outside, from afar, but once I got here and had the opportunity to meet ownership, to spend some time with John and Kyle, it all came to reality for me. So to be here is definitely a blessing for me. To be around this talented defense, the players that we have, and the things that we were able to do in free agency and also in the draft, I'm extremely excited and looking forward to the season. So,
all right, let's open up these questions. Do you think Wilkes uses a 4-3 more or 4-2 nickel? He's going to use a nickel more. That's the NFL. You need that extra speed on the field. The ratio is about 70-30, nickel to third linebacker, standard 4-3. Now, the luxury that you have if D. Winters and or Jalen Graham really starts working out is you can run 3 linebacker sets much more often. You can get those linebackers covering the tight ends, covering the backs coming out of the backfield. You can match up against some passing formations while not losing muscle against the run. That's the glory of having linebackers who can cover. We've seen the 49ers have some of that flexibility in the past. No more Azeez Al-Shaair, but you do have a couple guys in the pipeline looking to replace them. The speed on the defense is indeed really good. This was the number 1 defense last year in the National Football League for a reason. You guys like the watch that Margot got me, by the way? I just noticed it looking at her up on the screen. This was the pre-wedding watch I got this 5 minutes before she walked down the aisle. I think it's really nice. I think it's a good addition to the channel from Lombardi herself. Anyway, first, this is the debut of the watch on the channel. That man asked, do you think Kinlaw will benefit from being a rotational player? I think so. I mean, if the knee is a question mark, which it has been so far throughout essentially his entire NFL career, taking a little bit off the snap load can only help, right? And, then you just take psychologically, you take some pressure off of Javon Kinlaw, because you look at this, last year you needed him to slot into this 3 technique spot. This year you've got Hargrave, you've got Armstead. You love what you have in the middle. And obviously you need more because those guys can't play every single snap. But that's where, the rotational players come in. So less pressure on Javon Kinlaw. And I think the 49ers think that in a contract year, he can deliver this year. He could keep that knee as fresh as possible with the reduction in pressure on his performance. Jim Everett's back, a resident Rams fan. When do I think that Bosa's new deal will be done? I think that's going to be a deadline pressure thing right before training camp or right near the start of training camp after it starts. Do I think the 49ers will add one more top free agent defensive end? I think that they're getting a feel for what they have. I think OTAs are going to be nice for this team to see what they have. They've opened up the cap space. I've mentioned it as a possibility. They're also playing money ball right now, and that you don't want to be the team that, right after the comp pick formula closed, right? That happened a couple weeks ago after the draft. You don't want to be the first team to sign somebody. Prices of players might be still a little high. These guys are still out on the market. You can wait a little while. Stuff is going to happen in the NFL. If Jadeveon Clowney stays out there, I'm just tossing out a name for the hell of it. If Robert Quinn stays out there, maybe you're able to ink him a little bit closer to the start of the regular season or after somebody goes down in training camp. You don't have to rush to do it. These guys are also waiting it out, right? They want to try to maximize their price. So the 49ers could add somebody. They have the capability of adding somebody, but they should also show restraint because a better deal might come later. And you don't play a game here for 4 months, right? It's May 15th right now. You don't play a game until early September. So they might do it, but they might also be stacked enough to where they like where they're at and they don't want to bite any further into that salary cap space. The biggest concern on defense. Well, I think it's cornerback depth. I absolutely do think it is. Last year they struggled a bit with the D-line depth. They struggled a bit opposite Nick Bosa. That's a concern. So Drake Jackson performing, that's obviously something that you have to look at and you have to hope that he delivers. I guess that you raise the floor a little bit with Cleveland Farrell, but you don't really raise the ceiling with him. He didn't have all that many sacks in his time with the Raiders. So Drake Jackson is somebody that's a concern that has to deliver for this defense to deliver at the level that they want to play at. But another concern is if you say Charvarius Ward goes down or Deommodore Lenoir goes down, who's going to be next at corner? Is Luter going to step up, the rookie? Is Womack ready for prime time? Is he a little bit better than he was last year? Is Ambry Thomas ready to make a third-year jump after the second year saw a regression? To me, that is a concern. So the two biggest concerns are end opposite Bosa and then cornerback depth for the 49ers. Will the secondary miss the leadership of Jimmy Ward? I think that was a big deal. He was a 9-year player, almost made his way onto the 10-year wall, obviously played a bunch of different positions, but I think there's a lot of leadership to be had on this defense. That's not an area where they're lacking outside of Jimmy Ward, right? Fred Warner, Nick Bosa, Deshaun Gibson last year stepped in, became a leader right away. Hufanga is developing into a leader. They've got vets across the board. This is a really good defense. Missing one player who was actually playing out of position last year, and Jimmy Ward, I don't think is going to really hurt this football team from a leadership perspective. This is on offense, but Jared thinks Deebo Samuel is going to be a force this year. No, you didn't miss offense. This is a video on Steve Wilks, new 49ers defensive coordinator, who has stepped up and spoken to the media. Let's have a quick listen. This is for those just joining the show. This involves my question about Steve Wilks immersing himself in the 49ers defense.
I think you have to embrace the success that they've had here. I think it's a foundation that we all agree we wanted to keep. And I think there's an opportunity as we go through the process, which we already have, is to try to tweak things a little bit. I still think there's room for improvement. If you talk to the players, they would tell you the same. So when it's not broke, you don't really want to try to fix it. And once again, we've had a lot of success around here, and we just want to continue to build on that.
Kyle mentioned that one of the things he wanted you to do first was to look back at all 6 years, of this regime and the defense that they had instilled before. What was your biggest takeaway, or what have been your biggest takeaways looking at what the 49ers have done since 2017?
Well, I think, and my philosophy is the same. I've always had this. Everything we do starts up front. When you look at how dominant we've been over the years, is because of our defensive line. And we've done a great job building that through the draft. As I just alluded to, we did some great things in free agency this past year. So Kasarik does a tremendous job. He's one of the best in the business at what he does, and he's had a major impact on this defense. So that was really the biggest thing that stood out to me, was just how great we were up front consistently over the years.
Here's a question. Will the 49ers defense miss the leadership of D'Amico Ryans who's on the field? I think this is fan stuff. This is fan speak. Of course, Steve Wilks going to lead from the box. He's calling the plays from the box. So he's diagnosing and relaying information down. He's leading for there. And to act like professional athletes making millions of dollars a year, Nick Bosa, Fred Warner, etc., need a specific guy yelling at them on the sideline to galvanize themselves and play football is quite honestly preposterous. And it's not like they don't have coaches that are still fired. Chris Kasarik is still down on the field. Johnny Holland is still down on the field. So who cares if Steve Wilks prefers to be up in the box? Some coaches are up in the box. Some coaches are down on the field. That mix happens every single year. It just happens that the new defensive coordinator is going to be down on the field. I do not think that anything regarding the success of the 49ers defense over the past several years has been because Robert Saleh and the Miko Ryans were yelling down on the field. The success happened because those guys were good schematic minds who knew how to put their players in position to succeed. And if Steve Wilks can do that, then the 49ers are going to succeed because they have great personnel on this team. All right. Does Wilks have a favorite to play opposite Bosa? Well, I think he wants Drake Jackson to win the job. But they're going to be rotating guys, so everybody's going to get a chance. I think, again, Cleveland Farrell raises the floor. Drake Jackson raises the ceiling. If Drake Jackson can bring himself to a higher floor, he can be the guy that gets most of the snaps there. Supposedly, he's added muscle, which is a big deal for the 49ers. As long as the defense stays relatively healthy this year, the 49ers should expect to outperform last year's team. Could it possibly be a historical defense like the 85 Bears defense? Well, I mean, it's hard to prognosticate that in May, but they're strong at every single level. If Drake Jackson shows up, if D. Winters or Jalen Graham show up as star third linebackers, if Jair Brown is a first-year wonder and the cornerback depth, stays healthy, if the top cornerbacks stay healthy so you don't have to go too far into the depth, sure, they can be one of the all-time great defenses. The problem is the rules are so skewed in favor of the offense these days that even a defense that's as good as the 85 Bears is not going to put up the same type of numbers. So they're going to have that to fight against from performance and a perception standpoint, the 49ers will. The most impressive rookie in the interviews, I think, was easily Jair Brown. Mike, if you could rip that Jair Brown video that I put and we could play that, maybe I could show people what we mean about Jair Brown. I thought that he blew everybody away in that room, and you could see how he blew the 49ers away with his personality, just this effusive, just really positive, but really confident, and just a guy that's impressive. You can see what they liked in Jair Brown. He's a professional. Yeah, he's a professional. Hasn't even set foot on a game day field at NFL level yet by Jair Brown, already acting like a professional. Daniel Alfano, it just hit me. Chris Kasarik and Javon Hargrave is the under-radar coach-player marriage of the offseason next to Chubb and Fangio. Yeah, if you can consider under the radar, I think people consider Kasarik to be the best D-line coach in football, and most people are saying that Hargrave was the best defensive free agent addition in football. Maybe it's under the radar of Bosa and Kasarik, which is an awesome pairing. But the weakness of this defense last year was the interior D-line. And they went out and addressed it with a splash signing of Javon Hargrave. So that's a direct player acquisition to address the weakness by the 49ers. Brent thinks that Jair Brown is the 49ers' future free safety. And, free safety, strong safety, those are essentially interchangeable positions. I wrote about this. Let's find it here on The Athletic. Jair Brown, David Lombardi. I interviewed Anthony Poindexter, who is Penn State's safety coach. Here we go. And one thing that we talked about was the safety interchangeability. How over the past few years, you essentially have blurred the line between free and strong safety to where the strong safety can be playing single high, the free safety can be playing in the box, and vice versa. Normally, it was strong safety closer to the line, a bit bulkier, free safety a bit rangier, played further back. Now the 49ers want both of their safeties to be able to execute near the line and away from it. So Jair Brown was a good run stopper, tackler at Penn State, but he also had those 10 interceptions, so he can do both. Talanoa Hufanga, we've seen do both already with the interceptions. And now Mike does have the video. I think he's Yeah, Mike, whenever you're ready, go ahead and play that video with Jair Brown. Here we go.
This past, I guess, 2 weeks now, what's it been like for you since you heard your name called to where you are right now, standing in front of us?
I ain't stopped smiling yet. So it's been a amazing past 2 weeks. You know, I'm still, in just like this crazy like moment. Like I was smiling all day on the field today during the walkthrough. So it's just wow to me, and it's an amazing feeling.
Is it even more amazing when you hear, the cheers erupt in the draft room, when you hear people inside the organization talking about like you were a consensus pick that everybody stood on the table for and wanted here?
Yeah, it's this organization has a great staff. Like when I came here on my top 30 visit, like I just was, so amazed by how well we connected. Me and Coach Wilkes, me and John Lynch, it's just been, like a bond from the jump. So I was like, if I get to San Fran, man, I love San Fran. And then I end up going to San Fran. I knew as soon as I slipped the third round, I said, the kind of connection we had, they got it. I'm getting. And when they came and got me, it was just sky's the limit from there.
Did you hear about?
Sky is the limit from there. That's Jair Brown. The full interview is up on the channel. This guy was impressive talking to him. And that's Steve Wilks' guy. There's a lot of coaches' guys. And the front office, from the scouting department to the coaching staff, was all in agreement. They love Jair Brown. So that's who Steve Wilks is working with. Jair Brown is impressive. The 49ers defense is going to evolve under Steve Wilks. You heard it here. They're going to be more aggressive. They're going to take the blueprint. They're going to take the foundation. They're going to keep it, but they're going to add some bells and whistles. Everybody like the video, sub to the channel. Do it right now. It's been fun. We'll talk to you all very soon.